guys, today we're making the best crochet ankle socks. I love them and you're gonna love making them too. Let's go. So I'm gonna start with my fingering weight yarn. I'm using gray, light gray for the accent color. You want to make sure that you're using a fine yarn 2-weight. Now here you can see I've made a magic ring and I'm gonna put 8 single crochet in that magic ring. Of course, you can always use the chain 2 method and put those 8 single crochet in your first chain. One thing that's important to note is that you'll want to keep your tension pretty loose and you want to bring your hook up fairly high when you're doing that yarn over and drawing up a loop so that you can make your waistcoat stitches, also known as the split single crochet stitches, more easily. Okay, now you can see that I've done my 8 single crochet in the magic ring. I did not tighten up that ring completely because it makes it easier to make your first round of waistcoat stitches in this second round. So round 2 is going to be 2 waistcoat stitches in each single crochet. And you can see that I'm kind of struggling with this first stitch right here, and that's because my tension was too tight. You'll probably see that I struggle with that sometimes throughout this video because I have a tendency to have pretty tight tension. So do yourself a favor and loosen up your hands and make it easier on yourself. You can see that I've marked my first stitch. That's really important since we're working in a continuous round on this entire project. Make sure to mark your first stitch in every round. I've zoomed in so you can see what a waistcoat stitch looks like. I'm putting my hook through that front V of the single crochet in the first round, and then I'm finishing it like a regular single crochet. Repeat the 2 waistcoat stitches in each single crochet all the way around. This is my last stitch for round 2, and I'm going to grab my string from my magic circle and pull it tight so that we don't have a large hole in the center of our circle. We want a nice closed toe. I'm ready to start on my next round, and you should have 16 waistcoat stitches from round 2. And in round 3, you're just going to put 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the stitches around. So 16 waistcoat stitches. And again, you can see that I'm having to help this thing along because my tension was too tight on that round 2. So do yourself a favor and ease up on that tension. I'm on my last stitch of round 3, and we're going to do a repeat this 4th round. So our repeat for round 4 is going to go 2 waistcoat stitches in the next stitch, and then 1 waistcoat stitch in the following stitch. So you're going to do a pattern of 2 waistcoat stitches, 1 waistcoat stitch, all the way around. And you can see my tension is a little better this round. It still could be improved, but it's a little easier to get the hook into the place that I need it to go. Now just continue this repeat all the way around for round 4. I'm on my last stitch of round 4, and now we're going to do round 5, which is the single waistcoat stitch, 1 waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. This is the last stitch of round 5, and we're going to do round 6 with another repeat. For this repeat, you're going to start with the 2 waistcoat stitches in the next stitch, and you're going to put 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 2 stitches. So it's 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, all the way around. These are the last few stitches of round 6, and we're going to head into round 7. Now round 7 is going to be 1 waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. This is my last stitch for round 7. We're going to head into another repeat row with round 8. And you can see how this waistcoat stitch makes a really pretty knit look for this toe of this sock. Our repeat for round 8 will be the 2 waistcoat stitches in the next stitch, 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 3 stitches. So 2, 1, 1, 1, all the way around. This is my last stitch for round 8, and we're going to head into our last round for our toe, which is round 9. So round 9 is going to be our 1 waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. Now at this point, you should end with 40 stitches all the way around. Here is our final stitch of round 9, and that marks the end of our toe. And we're going to head into the foot part of the sock. For this foot section of the sock, we're going to build it up with about 30 rows of waistcoat stitches. We're not going to increase it all for these 30 rows that we're going to build up. I'm going to snip off this end right here, and I'm going to weave it in as I go. I like to do this for all of the ends so I don't have a lot of cleanup to do at the end. And here I'm going to switch to my next color. In this case, I'm choosing the navy. And you can see that I take the new yarn and I pull it through as though I'm finishing off that last waistcoat stitch so that it gives me a nice clean beginning for my next round. Now we start our first round of our foot section of the sock, and you're going to want to make sure that you are keeping track of each of your rows. So if you have a row or stitch counter, that might be useful. Otherwise, just keep track with tick marks on a paper or something like that. And you're going to have 30 rows of 1 waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. Then I'll meet you back here and we will work on the gusset. As I'm doing these rounds, I'm randomly changing my yarn color to make that pretty striped look. I've finished my 30 rounds of waistcoat stitches, and you can see that it makes a very beautiful knit-like pattern. This is a good time to try on your sock and make sure that it fits your foot. You're going to want this section of the sock to end right after the middle of your arch. And as I mentioned in my written pattern, this is a versatile pattern and you can adjust it to different sizes. And so trying it on is key to ensure that you can get a good fit with your sock. Now we're going to start in this first stitch. For the gusset, we're going to put 3 waistcoat stitches in that first stitch, and then we're going to put 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 19 stitches, and then we'll put another 3 waistcoat stitches in that following stitch, and then repeat that 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 19 stitches. So we're going to have an increase of 3 waistcoat stitches on each side of the sock. And you can mark both sides so that you can find where you are easily. Most of the time I don't use the stitch markers, but in this case I did because my navy is very dark and it's hard to see your stitches with that color. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this first round of the gusset. Again, it is 3 waistcoat stitches in the first stitch, and then 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 19 stitches. and you repeat that on the other side of the sock. I've finished my first row of the gusset, and now we're going to do our next 2 rows, which is very simple. It's just 1 waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. So for the next 2 rows, make 1 waistcoat stitch in each stitch around your sock. I'm doing my last few stitches of this 3rd round of the gusset, and we're going to start working on the 4th round, and we're going to increase again similar to what we did in the 1st round of the gusset. So our repeat for this round 4 of the gusset is going to be 3 waistcoat stitches in that first stitch, and then we're going to do 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 21 stitches, and then we'll make 3 waistcoat stitches in this stitch after those 21 stitches. So you want to go 3 waistcoat stitches in the first stitch, 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 21 stitches, 3 waistcoat stitches in the next stitch, and 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 21 stitches. So that's going to be our 4th round of the gusset. Let's put our 3 waistcoat stitches in this next stitch, and then we'll put our 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 21 stitches. Here are my final stitches for round 4 of the gusset, and we're going to start our next 2 rounds just like we did the other rounds. Our next 2 rounds are going to be 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the stitches around. This makes a great segue into beginning the shaping of our heel. Now, as we start this last round of the gusset, it's important to note that I am changing out this color because the gray is my accent color. It's what I use for the toe and the heel and the cuff. So I don't want to lose my heel in the stripes. So I've switched to my red, and I'm going to finish this final round of the gusset in red. So now we're finishing up the final round of the gusset, and if you're following along with me and haven't made any adjustments, you should have 48 stitches for this round. And you can see what the gusset does. It makes that opening wider so that your foot fits in there better, and it makes a really nice fit on my foot, so I hope it does the same for yours. So now it's time to shape the heel. We're going to do this by creating a chain stitch that goes all the way across. We'll make 24 chains, and then it will create a hole right there so that we can shape our heel at the end of this project. So for this round, we're going to be shaping the ankle as well as the hole for the heel. You want to put a waistcoat stitch in the first stitch, and then we're going to chain 24. You'll then skip the next 24 stitches and put a waistcoat stitch in each of the next 23 stitches. And make sure that your chains are not too tight. Those are going to be the base for your next round when we start building up that ankle. I've made my 24 chains, and now we're going to skip the next 24 stitches. Then join again with another waistcoat stitch. And the last part of this round is 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 23 stitches. After that round, you can see where it's beginning to take shape. We're going to form our heel in this area here later. Then we're going to build up our ankle in the next round. And I wanted to make a quick note right here that if you are adjusting this to fit your foot, you're going to want to adjust your heel as well. Just make sure your stitching is even on both sides of the heel. So for this next round, I'm going to switch out my color, and then I'm going to do one waistcoat stitch in the first stitch and one single crochet in each of the next 24 chains. And again, you want to make sure that your tension is loose enough and that you're creating enough room in that V space of those single crochets so that you can easily make your waistcoat stitches in the next round. I've done all my single crochets, and now I'm going to do a waistcoat stitch in each of the next 23 stitches. Okay, so I finished that up, and we're going to do 5 more rounds, and those are pretty simple. It's just going to be one waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. So for 5 more rows, one waistcoat stitch in each stitch around. I finished those last 5 rounds, and you can see that we are starting to form a sock. And this next section is going to be the ribbing. We're going to work that in rows, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But we're going to finish the ribbing, and then we'll form our heel right after we're done with that. To do the ribbing, I'm going to change out my hooks. I'm going to switch over to my 2.25 millimeter hook. And then I'm going to switch to my ribbing color, which is the same as my toe. You're going to want to join into your first stitch of your sock round, exactly where you would put your waistcoat stitch. So in that front V, push your hook through, draw up a loop, and draw through your loop on the hook. We're going to chain 6, and then we're going to work a slip stitch in each of the chains. Now we're going to join the next waistcoat stitch in the same space you would use for a waistcoat stitch. So in that V, push your hook in, draw up a loop, and slip stitch it through. Chain 1, turn, and we'll work our way back up our ribbing. We're going to make a slip stitch in the back loop only of each of the slip stitches that we've made. So you're going to have 5 slip stitches for the second row of your ribbing. Chain 1 and turn, and you're going to work back the same way that we worked up. You're going to put a slip stitch in the back loop only of each of the slip stitches you just made. Join into that next waistcoat stitch the same way we did the first time, and then slip stitch it through, chain 1, and turn, and work up that ribbing the same way that we did in the back loop only of each slip stitch, and work this pattern all the way around. You can see the ribbing is starting to form, and you're going to have this all the way around your sock. It really makes a nice tight ribbing, but it's not too tight, and it holds your sock up really well. I haven't had any issues with my sock sliding down, and this is part of the reason for that. So work the ribbing all the way around, and then we're going to finish up the ribbing with a seam. I'm going to do one last row of ribbing. I'm going to enter my hook into that joining space where I changed out my color for the ribbing. And I'm going to work that last row just as I did the other rows, back loop only, slip stitch in each of the stitches. Now we're ready to make our seam, And we're going to use the back loop only of our last row, and we're going to join it to the bottom loop of the chain. That's the chain 6 that we started at the beginning of our ribbing. So go in the back loop of your first slip stitch and then go through the bottom of the chain. Sometimes that's easier said than done. And then yarn over and slip stitch that through. Then you want to work that all the way down so that you've created your seam and you've closed up that hole. Okay, I've finished my seam and I'm going to fasten this off and then weave in the tail. All right, look at how far we've come. Now we just have to finish up our heel and we're going to have the best ankle sock you've ever made. Well, let's start our heel, and what we're going to do is we're going to start in the first stitch of row 46. I've switched back to my size G6 hook. I'm going to make sure to use my accent color, that same gray from the toe and the ribbing. And we're going to join in that stitch of row 46, that first stitch, with a slip stitch. And then we're going to single crochet in the same space, and we're going to work the next 23 stitches. So you should have 24 stitches on this first section of the heel. And as before, you're going to want to make sure your tension isn't too tight and you're leaving enough space in that V section of your single crochets so that you can easily make your waistcoat stitches in the next round. I'm working my last couple of stitches, and then we come to the corner, and the corner is going to be worked much like a decrease. I'll show you that in a second. So let me finish up this last stitch and we're gonna work that corner. So I'm gonna put my hook into the next stitch. I like to put it in that same space as a waistcoat stitch. It just makes it more solid. Draw up a loop, put it in the next stitch, draw up a loop, go to the next stitch, draw up a loop, and draw through all 4 loops on the hook. Now let's work the chain 24 section of the heel. You can do your 24 single crochet spaced evenly if that works better for you. I worked each single crochet in the bottom V space of each single crochet that I made in the chain 24. So it's up to you how you want to do it, but that's how I did it. We've come up to our next corner, and you're going to work that the exact same way we worked the last corner. You put your hook through the next stitch, drop a loop, next stitch, drop a loop, and the next stitch, drop a loop, and then draw through all 4 loops on your hook. And we're going to work this heel in a continuous round, so you're not going to join. We are going to mark our first stitch with our stitch marker like we did in the body of the sock. And we're going to start our waistcoat stitching again. In this first stitch, you're going to do one waistcoat stitch right in that V like we've always been doing. Now we're going to work a decrease. So the decrease is going to be worked over the next 2 stitches. We're going to put our hook exactly where we do for the waistcoat stitch, and then we're going to draw up a loop and we're going to put it in that next stitch in the same space as the waistcoat stitch, drop a loop, and then you draw through all 3 loops on your hook, and you've decreased by 1 stitch. And after our decrease, we're going to work a waistcoat stitch in each of the next 18 stitches. I'm coming up on my 18th stitch, and then we're going to work another decrease. You want to work that exactly the same way as we did before. So enter into where you would for a waistcoat stitch, draw up a loop, and enter in where you would for a waistcoat stitch in the next stitch, draw up a loop, and then draw through all 3 loops on your hook. And there's nothing special about working the corner now. You're just gonna do a waistcoat stitch in each of the stitches. The only one that is a little tricky is that center stitch, and just make sure that you go through enough of those V spaces so that you get a nice tight hold on that stitch and it's really secure. And now that our corner is done, we're going to work another decrease exactly as we did before. Enter in as you would a waistcoat stitch, draw up a loop, and go into the next stitch, draw up a loop, and draw through 3 loops on the hook. And then 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 18 stitches, and then we'll do another decrease, go into the other corner, and we'll start the next round of our heel. Now let's work our next decrease, and we're going to work our corner, and after that we'll start our next round. This round is going to be our repeat for the next 10 rounds, and then we'll have our heel finished and we'll just close it up. So I'll go with you for one more round, and then you can finish up your heel, and I'll show you how to make an invisible seam. So as I mentioned, we are working in a continuous round, so you just jump right in and do your first waistcoat stitch, and then you do a decrease over the next 2 stitches. And next you do 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 16 stitches. And work your decrease over these next 2 stitches, and then after that make 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 3 stitches in that corner, and then we'll work the rest of this round. Work your decrease over the next 2 stitches, and then we'll do 1 waistcoat stitch in each of the next 16 stitches. Work another decrease, and then work your corner as before, 1 waistcoat stitch in the 3 corner stitches. And after this round is done, you're going to work this same pattern for the next 7 rows. So you should have 10 rows of stitching for your heel. So go ahead and do your 7 rounds in this same pattern, and we'll meet back up here to finish our sock. I've finished my 10 rounds, and you can see that this has made a really nice heel for our sock. We're at the end, yay! We're gonna finish up our sock with an invisible seam. We're gonna close this opening. The seam that I use is really nice. It is not bulky, and it will not irritate your heel. So let's get started on that, and then you will have finished your first sock. Give yourself a nice length of yarn to work with, and then thread your yarn needle, and we're going to get started on our seam. To start my invisible seam, I'm going to enter in through the top of my stitch, and I'm going to go underneath that thread, that joining between those two stitches, and then I'm going to go to the opposite side and do the same thing on that first stitch. And this is how you're going to pull the seam together. It's going to pull together from the tops of the stitches, and that's what makes it invisible. So you can see I'm going over to the next side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go underneath that joining section of those two stitches, and I'm just going to weave back and forth until I've sealed that opening. And here I'm just going to show you how that seam is coming together. You can see that it is disappearing, and it's going to be a very nice light seam, not bulky at all on your heel. And now I'm coming to the end of it, and you just keep going until you have that completely closed off. And then I like to finish by weaving in the end to look just like the stitching that I've already done with my waistcoat stitches. So look at our seam. Isn't that a nice seam? It's almost invisible, and it's not going to rub against your heel or be uncomfortable or anything like that. My socks have been the most comfortable that I've actually ever worn, which is amazing because usually these wool blends and things like that can be itchy, and sometimes they stretch out too much, but this particular sock has done really well for me. And now you can see I'm weaving in my tail, and I'm using this stitching as my guide to help me weave it in invisibly. You won't see this stitching at all. It's going to be completely invisible. And you just keep doing this until you feel like you have a secure weave in, and then you'll be done with your sock. And this is my last weave in, and I'm going to just secure it behind the stitching inside as well, just to give it a little extra added security. I mean, you are wearing these on your feet, and so there will be a lot of movement and things like that, and you really want to make sure that this is secure. And look at that inside texture also. That is really super comfortable on your feet as well. I'm doing my last snip, and we're done. Of course, you want a matching pair, so you're going to have to watch this video over again. But you've made your first sock. The written pattern is up in my shop and available to you. I'll have that link in the description. As you head out, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share this with anyone you think might want to make it. So have a great day, and take care, friend. Thanks for coming along.